Well, hello everyone. Wow, it's already been a week since we were together last for coffee talk, and I have to again admit I'm very excited to be doing this on a weekly basis again. I just, there's actually a question that came in already, and somebody happy about the velocity of these, aka returning back to a weekly schedule. So I'm super excited. I hope you are too. We've got a lot of questions tonight, so let me get down to it. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist movement, and this is the weekly late night coffee talk where I take your questions. I take a break from what I'm working on. I come in here, I fire this bad boy up, and I take your questions. I'll have some things maybe I want to talk about, but primarily it is driven by you guys. Your questions are what guide what we talk about tonight, and I'm super excited because we got a whole passel of them. So it's going to be pretty incredible. And don't be afraid. Somebody asked this, what can I ask questions about? Look, you can ask questions about Texas. You can get into the fundamentals. I may not answer. I may just point you to some place where you can get the answer. But you can ask about Texas. You can ask about TNM. You can ask about Texas politics. You can pretty much ask whatever, right? I mean, I'm here. I'm with you for the next hour ish, depending on the velocity of questions. So. Housekeeping before we get started. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have questions or want to have a discussion, the chat is always running over there on our YouTube channel. And, super chats are welcome. It takes money to keep doing this. And if you support our work, sure would like to see you guys, chunk a little tip into the old tip jar if you don't mind. If you're watching on Facebook, I guess it's on our Facebook page. You can, again, like the page, like the post, comment on the post, and share the post. Your comments go in here into this chat, so ask your questions there as well. And if you're watching on X, formerly known as Twitter, be sure to drop your questions in the chat. Be sure to share this broadcast no matter where you're watching it. And let's get people on. I mean, look, we make ourselves really accessible for people that have questions about things. And sometimes, I don't have time to get all of them done. But a lot of those we don't get to. We wind up actually turning into articles on the website, on the TNM news site. And also there is no matter where you are, if you're in the YouTube chat, if you're on the Facebook chat, wherever, or comments, there's always a ton of Texiteers in there, Texians that are willing to be helpful. And so a lot of times they'll get to a question before I will. So you got to like that. All right. Wow. So I'm going to tell you, just before we get kicked off, we have got a lot of questions tonight. You guys, I'm sure, are getting ready to throw some in the chat, but we had a lopsided amount that came in via email, of all things. And actually, we've got some over here on the Late Night Coffee Talk group that's on TNM Social, so I'm going to be taking those as well. And I think we need to get started. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you a lot of these questions circulated around the the election of the Speaker of the House in the Texas House of Representatives yesterday. And so I just want to, before we get to the questions, I want to go through that a little bit. So to catch up, for those of you who do not, we're not keeping up with it, there was a contested speaker's race. And I talked about this some last week. I mean, we've talked about it off and on. There's articles about it on the TNM News website. So I'm not going to be able to get you completely caught up on it if you're kind of starting at square one. But the bottom line is there has been a massive internal contest inside of not just the Texas House of Representatives, but also within the Republican caucus in the Texas House of Representatives. And the fighting, the contest, the controversy over the issue of who's going to be the Speaker of the House has really spilled over into politics in general as a whole. There are people, a vast majority of Republican voters who believe that there is time for a change. They voted out almost a record number of incumbents in the last primary. The party has passed just probably some of the strongest rule sets that they've ever had, trying to rein people in that are wearing the Republican jersey. And there is some crossover for where we're at and what we're doing. I mean, we're obviously not a partisan organization, but there is some crossover. And that crossover comes in the fact that there are two planks in the Republican Party platform that call for a vote on Texas independence. Additionally, if you've kept up with our efforts to get a referendum to give you guys the opportunity to vote on this issue, you'll know what those efforts were like over the last two sessions. And there has been, even before that, a problem in the Texas House of Representatives with leadership, in the sense that the way that the leadership has been is probably not the most ideal scenario for what is ostensibly a body that is there to represent the people. And people like us, we are also people. We are constituents. We are voters. Our people make visits to the Capitol during session. They're visiting with these legislators outside of session. And there has been a prevailing sense for quite some time that not only do we have a massive disconnect between the political establishment and the people of Texas, but that there is a problem in the Texas House of Representatives with the way that it is led and run, to the point that you have issues that are extremely important to a very large number of people, and there is almost a tacit seal of approval on the part of leadership to essentially squash those people, to shut them up, to shut them down, and to not pass the things or to even take up and debate the things that are of concern to them. And this has been ramping up for many, many, many years. I would argue back to the time that Strauss and company pulled the coup on Tom Craddock as the Speaker of the House and basically ousted him, where you have effectively a union between a small number of Republicans and the Democrats as a whole that give them leadership control. And part of that quid pro quo is that the leader, the Speaker of the House, gets to put his thumb on the scale and gets to block out things that are maybe not popular with Democratic legislators or not popular with the political establishment. And so there has been a serious problem. I mean, people talk about how Texans are, and they talk about the Texan mindset, but unfortunately, while the voters are that way, it has not really played out that way in the Texas House of Representatives. And look, I've got criticisms on the Senate side too, but I'm just telling you this to get you caught up so that you have some context for what we're dealing with. Because yesterday, the 89th legislative session gavelled in, and you essentially had a contest between two Republicans. There was a Democratic candidate for Speaker of the House, but really you had two, and it was the spillover of this civil war that's happening inside the Republican Party. And it was essentially the establishment versus the grassroots, and the establishment broke their own caucus rules to get Dustin Burrows elected as Speaker of the Texas House. Now, I'm not going to comment. There's a lot of people out there that are already commenting. There's a lot of discussion about, whether the Republican, what should happen with the Republican caucus, since the rules call for the Republicans to vote as one body to elect the Speaker, and they have a majority. There's a lot of that. But what I want to do is I want to just kind of go through some of the things that I noticed, because we obviously ended up with Dustin Burrows from Lubbock as the Speaker. He was a close ally of Dade Phelan. He is sort of the continuation of the line that we've had since Joe Strauss, right? So there is some indication that might be a bit problematic, but we don't know. We don't know how much of that pressure is being felt by Burrows and company. I suspect, given how they have effectively thumbed their nose at the grassroots. I would venture to say that they did not learn their lesson during the last primary election. I mean, they seem pretty intent on, I think just kind of taking a crap all over rank and file voters. I mean, I think that's where they are. But look, we did a live stream. Hopefully, and by the way, thank you to those of you that tuned in and participated via chat yesterday. We did a live stream of the opening up to the results of the speaker vote. And we had, I think the total by the time it was all over with was somewhere between 12 and 1,500 across all platforms tuned in to our live stream. So thank you for that. And thank you to those of you that were watching on YouTube that gave us a super chat and threw some coin in the cup so that we could continue to do some things like this. But I will tell you from people on the ground, and we'll get to Chris Milton's question. Chris asked this in TNM Social, so I'll read it. He says, when swearing in a speaker, why did Dustin Burrows call those chambers the people's house when hundreds of people were kept from entering the gallery of the people's house? And that's a question for Dustin Burrows, but it lets me talk about one of the main observations that I wanted to take right out of the gate, and that is a lot of groups and organizations and individuals descended upon the Capitol yesterday because they believe that they needed to be heard and their will needed to be done. They were there to represent other voters in their district, and they wanted the representatives of those districts to act according to the will of those voters. And what you had was, obviously, it seemed to me that the fix was sort of in, because if you've never been to the House, and I wish I could pull up a picture of it, but you have the House floor, and then you have a gallery upstairs where anyone, you can go in, you can cop a squat, you can watch the proceedings. I would suggest to you that it is oftentimes like watching paint dry, except when it gets exciting. And that's, punctuated occasionally. But that being said, for opening day, they ticketed the gallery. So you had to have a ticket to get in the gallery, and everyone else who made the long drive, who spent their money, constituents in the people's house, were effectively barred from the gallery. Even when the people that had tickets got up and left and there were tons of empty seats, the people that were there to express themselves, make their presence known, they were barred from the gallery. And my question is the same as Chris's, where if this is indeed the people's house, why were the people not allowed to participate, at least by their presence, in those proceedings? And I can tell you that they will chalk it up to logistics issues, and they'll say anything else. But I think it was quite telling that when they gabbled in to today, because it was the first thing I did is when they gabbled in, I fired it up, and I listened to the speaker talk, or perhaps it was during his remarks yesterday. But one of the things I thought was interesting was he thanked the DPS for the security, right, for providing security, and talked about how these were unusual circumstances. So I have to ask myself, what sort of rhetoric is flying around in the Capitol that they would feel that they needed all of this security, and why would they refer to it as unusual circumstances? I mean, what did they think was going to happen, right? You had concerned citizens, men and women, all upstanding citizens, get on buses or drive, come to the Capitol, spend their own time, their own money, and somehow this is unusual circumstances. And I'm going to just say this because honestly, I don't care who it upsets, but the group of people that were there yesterday were there was less of a threat of disruption than there was last session when they had the transgender related bills, where they were conducting die-ins in the major thoroughfares and walkways of the Capitol. They were far more disruptive and had far more of it. I mean, they basically pledged that they were going to disrupt things. It happened several sessions back when you had people that were opposed to the immigration legislation that was coming out of Texas, disrupting the gallery, right? And there was far more of a chance of that than what you had with these folks. So why were these unusual circumstances in their minds? What are they? What picture are they trying to paint for these folks? I mean, they're already calling the people before they ever got there. They're already referring to them as extremists and zealots and all that sort of thing. So I think we should all be very cautious about where this rhetoric is going to head, and it would not surprise me to see it play out in some legislation where they begin to try to restrict more and more what these people do. And I'll tell you, it's the same criticism we had with Washington D.C. Under the Obama administration, under the Biden administration. You know, how are you going to label patriots as domestic extremists because they are passionate about their beliefs? They're not breaking laws. They're not being disruptive. They just wanted to go and make their presence known. So it's a good question, Chris. And then I'll throw this in here too, because I think this is something we need to talk about. This is, you know, for us, how we watched this may be a little bit different than the way a lot of other people watched it, right? You know, this was not about really there are a lot of people out there who are still painting this as, you know, David Cook was the more conservative choice, you know, and so conservatives lost. And there, I think maybe there's an argument potentially for that, in the sense that there will be bills that would be considered more conservative that will very well die because of the status quo leadership. I mean, you got a different Speaker of the House, but sort of the regime is the same. But honestly, it was not about David Cook being more conservative than Dustin Burrows or vice versa. You know, when you look at most of the scorecards, when you look at the liberal conservative ratings, those guys are neck and neck. I think I saw one where there was a 2-point difference or a 3-point difference between them. So that's not really what it was about. It was really about a culture change in the Texas House. And I think it's more constructive for everyone if we begin to think about it that way, right? If you have a Speaker of the House who is not calling balls and strikes, but's actually playing the game, and he's picking winners and losers, well, that's a problem. And it's been that way, frankly, since Strauss was Speaker. And it goes to some of the criticism that I have on the Senate side as well. So that's a whole other story. But the difference between Burrows and Cook was not really about who was more conservative or less conservative. It was, is the culture going to change, right? Is there going to be a change? And you've heard me, I've been very critical of the Texas House and how it's like a frat house. It's like a high school locker room. I mean, any of those things that I've said like that, I think help paint the picture. But basically, if you're not a favorite or you don't toe the line, then what happens is your bills get spiked. And so policy gets sacrificed for personality. And that becomes a major, major problem. And look, I'm gonna do this because one of my favorite speeches from yesterday was Representative Richard Raymond, who's a Democrat, who stood up to give one of the nominating speeches for David Cook. And hearing what Representative Raymond said, and I got to tell you, he's been kind of an interesting guy to watch over the years. Joe Moody, chair of the criminal jurisprudence committee, hates him, right? I see him tweeting negatively about him all the time. But Richard Raymond filed legislation last session requiring that Texas flags that fly over government buildings should be purchased in Texas first, and if not in Texas, in one of the other states of the United States. I mean, that's economic nationalism. That's literally a piece of our mission. But all that aside, we can talk about that later. But he gave what, to me, and he and I don't agree on. There's some things that we don't agree on. But he gave this nominating speech, and look, if you didn't see it, I'm gonna play it for you right now because it reinforces what we have talked about to all of you. No matter, everything about the Texas House and the culture in the Texas House and the things that are wrong, the impediments that we have to getting really important pieces of legislation like the Texas Independence Referendum Act. This really exposes to me, it reinforces what we've been saying all along. So let me just let him tell you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I second the nomination of David Cook as Speaker of the House. I first walked into this chamber, members, 32 years ago, and still believe my most important vote is that for Speaker. 3 friends of mine filed for Speaker: David, Ana Maria, Dustin. But the numbers being what they are, 88 Republicans, 62 Democrats. Initially, I supported Dustin. But as I learned more about the race and the candidates, I decided to vote for David Cook. Among other things, I looked at their time here in this chamber. I was willing to look past the things about each with which I did not agree. For example, Mr. Burrows and former Speaker Dennis Bonnen sitting in the Speaker's office trying to negotiate access, to allow access to someone if they would help them defeat Republicans and Democrats they did not like, and speaking candidly with disdain about many of you, something they both denied until they realized it had been recorded. In the end, it led to Dennis Bonnen having to retire from this chamber. But I moved past that. However, as this race began in earnest, I learned from firsthand witnesses, many of you, that it was Mr. Bonnen who was running Dustin's campaign, still running things. I'm sure he's watching now. Dennis, whose lobbying firm is appropriately and brazenly named Second Floor Strategies. I had hoped we could have a new beginning with Mr. Burrows, but that is clearly not the case, and you all know it. The more I learned about and thought about how only a few would be able to fully participate in a process and be a substantive part of the process, were we to continue with that regime, the more I knew that we must go in a new direction. I believe David Cook will take us in that new direction of allowing more of the members to be part of the process, Democrats and Republicans, not just those approved by the second floor strategist, where only a few are allowed into the room of influence and decision. I know that you want to be on the winning side. I've talked to so many of you, and I know that sometimes you fear that there will be repercussions if you are not. But we must move past those fears. We must be stronger than those fears. You know, I prayed a lot about my decision, and for me, prayers are very important. When you lose a child, as I lost my son Aaron 5 years ago, prayers are even more important in your life. I could not have continued to live were it not for prayers and my faith. So members, we must put fear aside and embrace our faith instead. We must put fear aside and put the people whom we represent ahead of those we fear. When I see the people up in this gallery, I may not agree with everything they stand on, they believe, but I know that these people have something in common with the constituents in every one of our districts. They fill us with their hopes and dreams, and mostly they just ask that we not be afraid to represent them, even when it is not easy. We must move away from a house controlled by a select few. Mr. Cook is a consensus builder. You know that if you've worked with him, who believes we should all be a part of this process. I've spoken with so many of you about this race, and I know that a majority of you want a new direction, a new start, and a new beginning. And I say let that begin by doing what your heart and your instincts tell you is the right thing. And there are some Democrats that want to sanction me or censure me. Well, let me tell you guys that are watching, one of the things with which I do not agree with my friend Dustin Burrows is the speech that he gave saying that even if every monument, Confederate monument, was taken down across the country, that they should stand in Texas because Texas is different. I don't agree with that. But boy, if Democrats come after me, Well, then Democrats, if you vote for Mr. Burrows, get ready, because now they come after you.
Mr.
But it's
Raymond,
not
your
about
time
party
has
politics.
expired.
It's about the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, there's some things that maybe he and I disagree on, but the bottom line is that speech that he gave ripped at least a corner of the lid off to let people see behind the curtain what's happening. I mean, you're hearing it from him. This is not just something, we've heard it from guys like Tony Tinderholt and others. We heard it from Kyle Biederman. And we know this. I mean, we've been working with legislators on all sorts of things for many, many years. And it's something that we have definitely observed, where you've got kind of a good old boys club. It's treated like a frat. And that's really what the battle was about. And so, what does this mean? I know a lot of the questions that I've gotten via email, I'm not going to go through them all one at a time. But this is, I'm going to try to bundle all of these up into one, because the question, the question is really what does this do for us? Well, what it does for us is it means it's sort of the same, because we don't know. Committee assignments are coming, and the question is going to be whether we're going to see a culture of retribution. Will Dustin Burrows be less on the retribution bandwagon than, say, Bonin or Strauss? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Or did he come close enough to losing to give him a bit of a wake up call to say, look, we're going to have to open up this process a little bit more. We're going to have to let these things happen. And, I was actually in a conversation with somebody in our T&M discussion group on Facebook earlier who, really did not understand where our bill got stymied. We haven't gotten stymied in calendars. That's not, our particular, there's some pieces of legislation, but the referendum bill hasn't. It's gotten stymied right at state affairs. And so I will tell you that the thing you need to be watching for is to see who gets the chairmanship of the State Affairs Committee. That's going to tell you an awful lot. Okay, so one more thing about this, and then I've got to move on to other topics. One other thing that I got a lot of comments about was this abject embarrassment. I mean, it's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the Honorable Sophronia Thompson of Harris County to lead the pledge to the Texas flag.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state
under God, one and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dean.
So we've got a long-term state representative who gets called upon to lead the House in the Texas Pledge, and very obviously does not know it. Doesn't know it. Now, it's one thing when we talk about how we've got too many legislators that just don't understand Article 1, Section 1 and Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. Those things right at the very beginning. That's one conversation. But this conversation where the House is kicking off, Texas Pledge is up, and you don't know it, and every school kid in Texas says it every morning before class. Guys, we've got some significant challenges among some of these legislators in the House. I mean, it's bad. And now there is a silver lining. I don't want to be because I've gotten a lot of messages about this too. I don't want to be that doom and gloom person. Look, if you're ready to curl up in a fetal position and suck your thumb over what happened yesterday, then you're not going to have the stomach for what we have to do moving forward, the work that's going to happen, the insults and the setbacks and the garbage that they're going to throw at us, right? You know, we look at it and go, okay, this is just going to make our work more difficult. But this does highlight the importance of some things, which is like last session. The work that we did last session directly led to more Texas First pledge signers, which led to Texas First pledge signers entering into the Texas legislature. You know, we can talk about this Burroughs and Cook situation till the cows come home, but let us not forget that you had 11 Texas First pledge signers take the oath of office and become legislators yesterday. That's massive, right? I mean, that is worth popping a cork on a champagne bottle for. That's massive because, and let me tell you why it's massive. It is exactly 11 more than they told you that we would ever get, right? So I want you to think about it from this standpoint. They told us we would never get the referendum bill filed. It's been filed twice. They said we would never get any, even if we got it filed, no one would ever sign on to it. And both times they had co-authors and joint authors. And so when we do it again, now that list gets longer, and now it's not legislators that we have to go in and kind of beg and cajole and everything else. These are people that signed a pledge to essentially support this. This is massive. Look, it was massive enough. This is earth-shaking enough. Just the fact that we've got these folks in there now and other allies that have not signed the pledge, right? So it's not like we're just going in with a roster of 11, but we've got other allies. But it's massive enough. You have to remember that it's been this issue has been discussed in Newsweek magazine multiple times. Right? The Dallas Morning News on the eve of the primary sent off a warning flare and said, holy crap, you got a bunch of people that signed this pledge that are on the ballot and are probably going to win their races. And most of them did. So guys, you know, you may feel a little demoralized about the Burroughs thing, but look, the jury's still out. You don't know how that's going to play out. You got to play with what you got. Right? And what you got now is you got some star players that are in the Texas legislature that are ready to advance Texas first. That's massive. And it's massive for us. And so while, you know, that video I just played you, that's one legislator. And I think that is representative of the old way. You know, I think what you saw there is a dinosaur. And I'm not bagging on Symphonia Thompson's age, but what I'm saying is that is the last vestiges of what's going to happen. So of sort of the old way of doing business. So I'm going to play this scenario out because I've got this question over here, and this is going to be a good segue. By the way, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and thank Netgear here for your super chat of 1836. Thank you so much. Texas is going to happen. It is just a matter of time. You are correct, sir, and really do appreciate that super chat. Thank you so much. Okay, let me hang on before I get to Ron's question. Let me get down to this here, right? So James says, Rule 44, please explain. So let me give you sort of the high points, okay? So for many years, I mean, we've observed this, I think, almost since our first interaction directly with the Republican Party of Texas. You know, when we had to force that floor debate on adding a plank about leaving the Union. There has been a slow and steady move toward accountability in the party. Okay, so this goes back to something that I talked about earlier, which is this disconnect between the political establishment and the grassroots. But this is playing out a little bit more in a disconnect between the electeds and the party. To run for a political party here in Texas, if you want to run Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. All you have to do is go file a piece of paper and pay your money. Okay, so you could go resurrect the corpse of Joseph Stalin, and as long as he meets the residency requirements for Texas, he could go run as a Republican. Okay, so there is no, ideological criteria, right? So it's essentially, rolling up, having no bona fides, whatever it is, as long as you can pay your filing fee and you don't even have to write your own form. You could have somebody fill it out for you as long as you put your X on it. But you pay the money, you could put on the team jersey and go out there and rep the team. Okay. Well, that's a problem. I mean, can you imagine any other organization being forced to do that? So the Republican Party of Texas has been really cognizant of this, and I think been consciously making steps toward accountability, because as was told to me by a state rep one time, he says there's campaigning and then there's governing. Okay. And so you have these guys campaign as, whatever their campaign promises are, and then they run off, and once they're elected, they go do something different. And the problem, and I agree with the Republican Party on this, the problem is that when people wear your team jersey and they act like a bum, then if you're on that same team, they think you're a bum too, right? So the party has been, by virtue of the Texas Election Code and how that's done, has been marginalized in the role. The candidates maintain their own campaign coffers. They don't get a lot of support. Well, there's been a conscious shift of the party to reclaim the brand for the party, to reclaim that party brand. Basically saying, if you're going to run in our party, you're going to be one of us. And here's what you're going to promote, right? So that being said, a few conventions back, they passed Rule 44, which allowed county parties to censure. Please don't misspell this censor. That's a different word, but censure elected officials who violate the party platform and the principles, okay, and the rules. And so you started seeing, Joe Strauss got censured, and I don't think it was a coincidence that after he got censured, that he decided, I'm not going to run again. And you've seen this happen with so many of these people. So censure has been a pretty effective tool in holding these guys at least publicly accountable. Okay. And so what Rule 44 has needed has been some additional teeth. And of course, they added some teeth to it, allowing the party to, if an official has been censured, I think it's on 3 occasions or whatever it is, the party has the right, before this last convention, to actually spend money against them, to let people in their district know they were censured and why they were censured. So it really has become a mechanism to try to get these incumbents on a leash and say, look, if you're going to wear the brand, if you're going to wear the brand, you're going to ride for the brand. Okay. This last convention, they took it a step further, and they essentially authorized in the rules, the new rules, that if, and I don't remember the exact specifics because I think there's some multiple triggers, but they can, if an official is censured, then they can refuse. The instruction is that they can refuse to accept their filing to run for office as a Republican. Okay. Now this runs afoul, some say, of the Texas Election Code. But I think the Republican Party of Texas is right in claiming its associational rights. And if the legislators and the establishment don't like it, it's time to divorce the party organizations from the Texas Election Code. Because let's be honest, as we saw how they screwed us over on the petition, it's not like the Texas Election Code is ironclad, right? They can kind of do with it what they want. So this is what is waiting in the wings for 30 plus representatives who essentially violated not only the Texas House Republican Caucus rules, but violated one of the main priorities, platform planks, whatever you want to call it, of the Republican Party of Texas. Abraham George, chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, made it known. He personally contacted all these guys and said, look, you understand if you don't do this, then the party is going to take action. To which Cody Harris went and filed a TEC, a Texas Ethics Commission complaint against him, and is trying to get him criminal charges over legislative bribery for just telling these guys, look, there's consequences on the other end if you don't do the right thing here. And Abraham George could do 2 years in jail over the thing. So, this has yet to play out all the way. But Rule 44, that's, if you want to know what that is, when you hear people talk about Rule 44, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about Rule 44 censure. And I imagine we are probably days away from seeing the first censure resolutions come out of county parties. Anyway, thanks for your question, James. That was a good one. Okay. Okay, let's go here. Ron says, the new speaker is the guy who killed our bill and calendars last time. How do we combat that? Yeah, that actually goes back to something that I talked about a while ago. Our bill didn't die calendars, right? It died in state affairs when the chairman, Todd Hunter, would not schedule it for a hearing. Now, granted, those circumstances were different, right? I mean, you had Brian Slayton, who wound up subsequently getting purged from the legislature for having sex with a staffer, right? His political career done. And unfortunately, it was his name at the top of our bill. So that wasn't going to get done anyway, and nobody was going to touch it. And you have to remember that the House was in a bit of a foul mood, because not only did they go after Slayton, that's when they went after Paxton as well. So look, the committee assignments, particularly state affairs and the makeup of calendars, is going to be super important. I really would love to see them do away with the calendars committee. There did not used to be one. As a matter of fact, I've got an article about that that's about halfway done, where I went back and found when they actually created the calendars committee. And from what I can tell, it was a product of its time, but it's kind of completely unnecessary at this point. So anyway, thanks for your question, Ron. Okay. Crunchbite says, where did you get that statue holding the Texas flag down? You're talking about the Texian, right? And so I said you can ask me any question, so I have to make good on this, right? That came from, so if you've ever been to the Montgomery Flag Park, okay, Montgomery is the home of the Lone Star flag, okay? So this bad boy right here, Montgomery, okay? And there's an interesting connection between that flag and actually Dr. Quartrup, which some of you guys know, but we don't have time to talk about that. But it's interesting how small of a world it is, and how there is an explicit Texas connection just about everywhere you go. But anyway, at Montgomery Flag Park, with the little park they set up to commemorate that as the birthplace of the Lone Star flag, they commissioned an artist, a sculptor named Craig Campobella, to make a statue. And that's the statue. That's not the actual statue, right? Because that would be really underwhelming if everyone went there. And not only was it that tiny, but it was no longer there because it was sitting on my shelf, right? That's a smaller version of it. And so Craig did the massive one. So if you see it, there's pictures online, go look it up, and it's called the Texian. So many, many years ago, I guess probably 10 or 11 years ago, Dave Roberts, which, by the way, rest in peace, sir. His birthday was yesterday. He and Randy Council commissioned a run of these smaller statues to help us with fundraising. right? So Craig took his original, got it all shrunk down, and did these bronzes. And I was given this one, right? And each one, there was a limited number, and each one has the name of a prominent figure from the Texas Revolution, and they're all individuals, so there are no two that are alike. And this one is the Mirabeau Lamar, and it's you know, he was the father of Texas nationalism, they say. So that's how I wound up with it. That's where it came from. And Craig Campobella's work's pretty amazing. If you haven't seen his bronze of the Battle of Gonzales, Dave had it made, and it was in his office, and then he wound up gifting it to the city of Gonzales, and the thing is just amazing. Craig Campobella is a true artist and has a true love for Texas. So anyway, that's where I got it. And oddly enough, now that I think about it, I think that there is one more that Daphne that exists, not of Mirabeau Lamar, but there's one more that exists that Daphne is doing for a fundraiser. But I think there'll be details about that soon. Okay, really quickly, we're sliding in here, and I'm barely scratched the surface. Although I would like to think that I'm knocking a bunch of these out, because a lot of them are sort of along similar lines. But there is enough time. Look, if you sneak a question in, go drop it in the chat, go drop it in the comments, or email it over to coffeetalk@vtnm.org. And let me go to the email right now. Timothy says, hang on. Okay, Timothy says, I know you'll comment tonight on the situation in the Texas House, but what does the landscape in the Texas Senate look like? If we can't get Tara into the House State Affairs Committee, do we have a better chance in the Senate? I can talk about this in broad terms, but I am reluctant to get very specific because I don't want to sabotage anything that's going on. But look, our spot in the Senate is kind of the same way that it was the last two times, which is we need movement on the House side to bring out the folks that are on the Senate side. And that's what I can say about that. I think that part of the challenge on the Senate side, and I know part of the challenge from the senators we've talked to is the path, right? Their concern is they file it in the Senate, it dies in the House, like so many other things. And they don't want to catch grief because it is, look, this piece of legislation is historical. I mean, this goes down in the history books when this happens. And I think there is a legacy concern on their part that they don't want to be seen as the ones that tanked it or torpedoed it or whatever. And I can understand that to a certain extent. So they want to see that movement because they know if we can get movement on the House side, then it definitely means that we could probably get that movement on the Senate side. And we're already tallying people up, right? We're already going through, having the conversations, finding out where they are. And as a matter of fact, this would be a good time for me to mention, I need you to watch your email because we're going to be looking for volunteers. Our Department of Governmental Engagement, Paul Roby is going to be putting together legislative activists, people that are going to commit to maybe writing a letter or maybe making a phone call or doing whatever. And so we need a roll call. And so be looking for that announcement because we'll get a form you can fill out and sign up and everything else. But that's what it is. If we can, and you hit the nail on the head, if we can get it, I mean, every bill gets assigned to a committee, right? So it will get assigned. What will be the tail of the tape is whether or not we're going to get a hearing, right? And that's going to be the key. What I've seen with other bills in the past, how long it takes for legislation to advance, this should be our session to be able to kind of break it through because we're still going to be here. It's substantively the same bill. The only difference are the dates, right? So it's going to be, I think our odds of getting the committee hearing are going to be massive. But again, that's all going to be a function of how that shakes down. If you get a Jared Patterson as head of state affairs or something like that, there's no way in hell that guy schedules a hearing for it. And bottom line is, and going back to that Rule 44 censure question, 30 plus Republican incumbents pretty much very likely just committed political suicide over that vote yesterday because of this, because the party is going to go fight this thing all the way through. And we can get into some of the nuance of that, just not tonight because it's kind of long. But the bottom line is they picked it. So, we could be looking. I mean, there's so many different pieces at play right now. Anyway, thank you for that question. All right, let's take one from TNM Social. Shannon asks, what is our best strategy until the next primary election to deal with purging the House of these rhinos who voted for Burrows? Here's the bottom line. And I will tell you that as Texas Nationalists, we need to look at this, even if you're a Republican, change your frame of mind a bit, right? Take the partisan aspect of it out, and what you're going to find is a lot of that group that coalesced around Burrows were very publicly and vocally opposed to letting Texans vote on Texas independence. So if that makes it more palatable for people that are, nonpartisan on this issue, then so be it. But understand that there is a significant overlap between those that supported Burrows and those that have been publicly and vocally against letting you vote on independence. So have no fear about tucking into those guys. But here's the strategy, right? We have to continue to build on the success that we've always had. We need to. It's the same plan. I mean, it's literally the exact same play, right? I mean, in a general sense, strategically speaking, right? It is for us. It is building capacity and then getting the vote. And what does that look like? Building capacity means organizing locally, getting our volunteers out there, connecting with Texans. I mean, I don't know if you guys paid attention to Farage's party, Reform UK, but they threw their counter up there, and when they crossed over the number of members that was more than the Conservative Party, it went off like a bombshell over there in the UK. And it's kind of a similar situation for us. We need to start looking at, we're already doing it, but we need to be looking at increasing that support, connecting with our people. We know they're out there. And I know this sounds like a broken record, but I cannot stress to you how important it is that we connect with our people and get them connected to the movement. We have to organize. That's all about building capacity. Beyond that, if we're talking about sort of the candidate strategy, my understanding is there are already primary challengers lining up, and some have announced. John Boucher over in Montgomery County has already announced a challenge to Will Metcalf, right? And so, you're going to see more and more of these pop up. And my encouragement is when you see someone that is announcing, be sure you get them over to sign the Texas First Pledge at taketexasback.com. Additionally, one of the things that you need to be doing, if you're not considering a run for yourself, and by the way, congratulations to everyone who was sworn in. Christina Drury just got sworn in as a Smith County commissioner. She's I think she's doing her county trainings right now, but congratulations to all of them. But if you're looking at potentially a future run, sign the pledge, go run for city council, go run for school board, go run at the county level, right? But also encourage current office holders and candidates to go sign that Texas First Pledge. It means the world. The other thing is that we have to be extremely effective at raising money, not just for the TNM, but for the TNM's PAC. We cannot spend for candidates from revenue from the main TNM organization. Anything that we spend in advocacy for candidates has to come from the PAC. And I will tell you that much like fundraising dried up because, you know, all the campaigns and races were sucking all the money out, and you know, we were having a hard time on the TNM side. The TNM PAC suffered even more. I turned in our campaign finance report today, and the PAC had 5 contributions from July the 1st to December 31st. Five for a total of, like, I think $600. So you know, I get it, you know, but if we're going to do these sorts of things, we need to, you know, we're going to need the support and the help. But from the TNM perspective, the best strategy is we continue to push through, right? We're following that same exact strategy. We're organizing on the ground. We are recruiting and advising candidates and getting them educated on this issue. With the session gavelled in, we're working legislators, and we got to turn people loose on these, because at the end of the day, pressure matters. I mean, it does. And the more external pressure we can ramp up, particularly in these districts, the better off we are. And if we can just continue to dial up that pressure, you're going to get a breakthrough. It's inevitable. So anyway, thank you for that question, Shannon. Okay. Oh man, we got a few more. Let's take this one. This is a good one for folks that are brand new to this. John says, what's it going to take to get a referendum for Texas citizens to vote on succession? You mean secession, and you don't mean secession. You mean for reasserting our status as an independent nation. And therein is the answer. Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution says that the people have at all times the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such manner as they may think expedient. So ultimately, the question of Texas reasserting its status as an independent nation has to go on the ballot and let the people of Texas win. For that to happen, because Texas is not an initiative and referendum state, we have to have legislation filed in the Texas legislature and passed that will give Texans a vote on this issue. Now, the good news is that we have that legislation. It's called the Texas Independence Referendum Act. It was filed 2 sessions ago. It was filed last session, and it will be filed again this session. And ultimately, what that piece of legislation, when it passes, what it will do is give Texans a statewide, legally, lawfully constituted referendum to answer the question, should the state of Texas reassert its status as an independent nation? So if you want to know more about that, you can always head over to texitnow.org. We've got answers to the most asked questions about the Texan issue. So be sure to check that out, John, and thank you for your question. Betty says, thank you for welcoming me. I'm a born and raised Texan, but presently misplaced in Oklahoma. That's okay. We consider Oklahoma the largest county in Texas. Says, will Texas ever be an independent country again? The answer is yes. We believe, as Texas Nationalists, that Texas should always be politically, culturally, and economically independent. And so the fact of the matter is, Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution starts off with the words that Texas is a free and independent state. So you take that at face value and say, well, we already are. The problem is that we are part of a compact. We are part of a membership organization comprised of 50 members called the United States of America. And as we are members of that, and because we're members of that, we are now subjected to 180,000 pages of federal laws, rules, and regulations administered by 2.5 million unelected federal bureaucrats that are absolutely squashing the life out of us. And so the thing that Texas needs to do, as you heard me say a moment ago, is reassert its status as an independent nation and withdraw from that membership organization and function as a fully sovereign, self-governing, independent nation state. And so your question is, will we ever be independent? Absolutely. We are always, it's the mission of our organization to secure and protect the political, cultural, and economic independence of the nation of Texas. We are always working toward making Texas fully sovereign, independent, and self-governing. Anyway, Betty, welcome, and thank you so much for your question. Okay. Okay. Okay, this question, got any update with the Northern Mexico independence movement? It ties into the creation of the South Texas Triangle, bringing in Monterrey into this, and apparently Coahuila and Tim. Okay, so yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Now, I made an announcement several months ago. I mean, it's probably a half a year now. That we would be working with the independence movements in the northern states of Mexico. And we have initiated that process. We're kind of waiting on them to get some things done, right? And to figure out where we can help best. But I will tell you right now, aside from that, we're starting to see some movement in Nuevo Leon. So when we announced it, there were those in sort of the progressive left-leaning media that said, they're making this crap up. There are no secessionists in northern Mexico. And then they popped up and said, oh, yeah, we're here. This is us. And do you think those people printed retractions or corrections? Of course not. And they wonder why people no longer read or watch their crap. Okay, so we got that one done. Thank you for that question. Let's look here. Caleb, he says, ought we nullify the speaker vote given it is so utterly contrary to the will of the governed? It's not procedurally not up to us, and there's no mechanism for us to do that. This goes to the thing that we hear all the time, which is elections have consequences, right? I mean, they do. In those districts where you have those people that sort of abrogated the will of the people, understand there's, as I got a question in, somebody said, how do we recall them? You don't. You have to understand elections have consequences. And so, do you work for these candidates? Have you donated to their challengers? I mean, what has been your involvement in this process? Look, you don't win them all. Sometimes these guys flood you with money that comes in from outside of Texas, but that's why we have to fight harder. I say it all the time. We have to work twice as hard for half as much, but that's just the way that it is. The victories come not like manna from heaven, but like you're sometimes pulling your teeth with a set of rusty pliers. I mean, it's just the way it is. Okay. And so, we have to get that mindset. Just kind of like, the Texian army during the runaway scrape sometimes, where it's like, look, we're going to have to continue to survive another day until we can find the optimal battleground that gives us the highest probability of success. And this is it. That's just the reality of it. When you're dealing with a lot of these guys that are, not responsive to you, what are you doing in your district to make a difference? Are you supporting their opponents? Are you running yourself? Are you volunteering for their opponents? Are you, if one of those, if I was a constituent for one of those guys, I'd already be on the phone with them. Look, I've already registered my complaint with Dade Phelan, but I already knew how he was going to vote, so it really didn't matter too much, did it? Yes, I live in his district. Not my fault. Don't blame me. Okay, let me check over here really quickly. Yep, that's a comment. Clark asks, is TNM going to financially aid the replacement of the false Republicans in the next election? Depending on how people contribute to our political action committee is going to determine how much we can directly financially participate in those. Other than that, it will have to be in education, right? There's, we're our hands are tied on a lot of these laws too. There are things that we can do in educating voters on these sorts of things, but how are we going to do it? Are we going to financial aid them? Sure. I mean, depending on what the situation is with the PAC, it's the bottom line. Okay. Taking one more swipe because, hey, we're overtime. That's pretty cool. I like that. All right. Well, guys, look, that looks like it is the, that looks like it is Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, you did a good job tonight. There were a lot of great questions. Um, I love some of these. All right, super cool. All right, well, look, just a reminder. I know I've said it before, but I just want to remind you. Look, if you want to support these efforts and keep these live streams going and make sure that we're advancing the cause of Texas independence. I mean, it doesn't just go for live streams. I mean, we're out there every single solitary day, uh, organizing, whether it's online or in person. We're in 55, 56, 57 counties right now, organizing those counties, getting ready for when we get the vote so we can win the vote. We're building this organization statewide. And if you want to advance the cause of Texas independence and we need your help, head over to donate.tnm.me and help us out. Drop some coin in there. Set up a regular contribution, even if it's $5 or $10 or something along those lines. And as I mentioned last week, donations count toward membership credit. So super, super important to remember there. Additionally, and this actually came up in my conversation with the folks in the TNM discussion group on Facebook. There were people in there asking me questions about the petition campaign, from a year ago. Even after it had been covered in mainstream media and had been all over alternative media, and I'd done numerous TV interviews about it. We'd published tons of articles about it on the TNM news site, posted all over social media, and they did not know the disposition. It wasn't just one person, right? And so, what my advice to them was two things. Number one is make sure you can get our emails, but more importantly, number two, make sure you download the TNM app, right? Because that's the way that we bypass big tech censorship. And it happens on your inbox, and it happens even on, your favorite platform. They can say that they don't censor, but the algorithm is not favorable to us. And so if you're going to communicate if we're going to be able to communicate with you and everything that's going on up to the minute, you got to go download the mobile app for Android and iPhone both. Go to tnm.me/app. We spend some coin to make sure that thing stays running, and sure would be great for you guys to download it and use the heck out of it. And while you're there, you can communicate with others in your county, in your House district, in your Senate district, and you can network and organize and do all those cool things. So download the TNM app. And of course, look, if you're a first timer, and you have not registered your support, and you support the political, cultural, and economic independence of the nation of Texas, head over to tnm.me/vote and register your support. And while you're there, check that box to say, I want to become a member, right? I mean, $4 get you in the door. You can get a membership. It's free if you want to register. Registering your support is absolutely free. But if you want to become a member, it's $4.21 standing between you and doing something concrete to help us advance the cause of Texas independence. Okay, friends, that is it. I've got to get back to work. Now, there was a lot of coffee and a lot of talk. I think it was a fair balance tonight. A reminder, I'll be back here next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. If you want to go ahead and get your questions in ahead of time, look, you don't have to wait till Wednesdays to do it. Go send them to coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Right there, it is on the screen. You can send it to coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Get them in the queue early, or go on that aforementioned TNM app, our mobile app for TNM Social. Go to the late night coffee talk group. Drop them in there. I mine questions out of there all the time. But until then, my friends, I will leave you with the words that I leave you with every time we're together. They're not my words. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.
If you feel you've no real voice, At the polls, there's no good choice, and the best is a lesser evil, just who. And it is time for a real change. Instead of voting more of the same, only one solution restores the power to you. When Texan rights have been impaired, and it's gone on for many years, there's only one way left to correct it. You know the Texans are the best to decide the future of Texas, so pledge your vote today for Texas. July the 4th, we celebrate an exit of the United States from a British Empire that denied them representation. Yeah, and history repeats, they say. Britain's past became their fate when a Brexit vote restored Britain's status as a nation. When the Constitution is ignored, state sovereignty thrown overboard, and all attempts to restore it have been rejected. You know the Texans are the best to decide the future of Texas, so pledge your vote today for Texas. So high, no limits seem to apply. Is this the future we want for our Lone Star? What if tax dollars stayed in our state and Texans had the final say? Well, that's a future I'd be happy to vote for. You see corruption in D.C. or want a real tax decrease? There's only one solution left, you guessed it. You know the Texans are the best to decide the future of Texas, so pledge your vote today for Texas.